So, Inside Out 2 is almost here, and as we've seen in the trailers and posters, the core emotions are gonna get absolutely raided by a new cast of pubescent emotions. The conceptual roster will now be doubling in size. However, in the lead up to this movie, there's been an interesting revelation from insiders that's come out of one of the new emotions being entirely cut from the movie. Cause yes, believe it or not, there is in fact a cancelled Inside Out 2 emotion. And you may be wondering, why? Well, it turns out it's because they thought it was making the movie too dark. Place your bets now for what kind of emotions you think it could pop up with. Spoilers, it's not quite horniness. But it is interesting, as it would suggest that Pixar are looking to balance the emotional side with the comedy, like in the first one, rather than going to a darker place with it. I mean, that would be a weird direction if suddenly Riley's life was so awful by the depths of some directions of emotions. I mean, if they're looking to make sure the comedy is in there, I'm just saying. And the sort of vibes we got from, say, the ending of the first Inside Out movie, where we got to see inside of other characters' heads for a slight little gag, is clearly far more up their alley for a nice, light-hearted experience that you can teach kids the depths of emotions with. Heck, the post-credits idea I'd love to see is doing that same kind of thing again, but with other Pixar characters. Remember like how they remade all of those previous scenes from past Pixar movies and replaced them with Cars characters at the end of the original Cars movie? That'd be fun to see. Inside the emotions of Woody and Buzz, you know? Or you could do one of zooming into Mike Wazowski's head where all the emotions have one eye, just like him, you know? Something nice like that. It would take the same remodeling prowess as what was needed in the original credits of Inside Out 1, whereby they replaced them with dogs and cats. How have they not done this yet? How is this not a surprisingly disappointing project on Disney Plus already? Like, there's so many other options as well. Like, I'm thinking now, The Incredibles, where the emotions all have their masks on or something, you know? Or they each have superpowers. Like, Jack's head has way too much going on inside him. Anyway, it's looking like there were concerns during production that one particular emotion would take the movie too far into a dark place, even though the actual concept of this character is not that, demonic. It's not like grief or anything like that. Cutting down the options for your predictions. But it makes sense to find that balance between comedy and emotional themes. You've got to nurture all types of emotional beats when your movie personifies emotions, I guess. Or at least that's according to the sequel's director, Kelsey Mann, speaking to Screen Rant. Mann will be taking over the director reins from Pete Docter, who helmed the 2015 original, and to be fair, the guy's now the head of the company, so I get why he can direct less stuff now. It does leave me wondering if losing the director of Monsters, Inc. and Up to a studio head role was actually a bad thing to Pixar. I certainly hope the same doesn't happen to James Gunn now that he's the head of the DC movies. Anyway, this sequel has been in discussion ever since the first one ever came out, releasing 9 years ago. The original Inside Out grossed $858 million globally. Amazing for a completely original movie. I love when Pixar does well. Critically acclaimed, won Best Animated Feature, made everyone cry about Bing Bong. You know how this all went down. It's also introduced a concept with a lot of potential. You've suddenly opened up a whole universe of different people's heads to explore, as well as what certain life experiences would do to all those little guys running the emotional shop. As set up at the end of the first movie, puberty implied a whole new realm of storytelling and humor too. It just practically writes itself. It was one of those endings that was kind of a half joke that audiences then really picked up on as the sequel is coming. And considering what happened to The Incredibles, let's just hope this one turns out better than that. And in true Pixar fashion, here we are, 8 years later. Now, initially, the first trailer introduced anxiety, which does seem to be a good place to start for the teenage phase. It's interesting to note that, of course, they are a bit of a negative emotion and will be the major conflict in this story, taking on the leadership role of the whole body and trying to circumnavigate Riley's entire personality. If anything, that one addition alone could have probably sustained a movie of its own, but I'm glad they're not stretching it out too far. I hope not, anyway. Then the subsequent poster immediately teased more emotions, so we knew they were coming. Beyond anxiety, we got embarrassment, envy, and ennui. Although ironically enough, embarrassment is quite a negative emotion. Envy, I think, can maybe be positive, but it's kind of got a vague negative vibe. And ennui, boredom, I feel like every time I do an Inside Out 2 video now, I have to refresh on the definition of ennui. Again, just kind of negativity. I would just love awful puberty. And I say boredom, in Pixar character descriptions, ennui couldn't care less and is bored and lethargic. I guess that's pretty simple when you hear it like that. It's quite clear that this is definitely a cornerstone teenage emotion, and that just calling that character bored wouldn't have quite captured it. I get it. Also interesting to explain ennui to a kid, but I guess Pixar's motto is they don't just make kids movies, they're for everyone, so they can't just dumb everything down. I don't know, I think I'm just salty that there's going to be a generation who know a complicated word that I didn't at their age. Even still, it's yet another emotion that's all just negativity. However, as has been reported, they did have another, much more complicated emotion on the cards, and it's another negative one. but I guess its negativity just goes a bit too far, as that emotion is shame. Anyone want a colourful, fun movie with Riley having to deal with that? However, I can see why they considered it. Hey, thank you for making it halfway through this video. This is the cheeky little plug to tell you to subscribe if you haven't already, or check out our entire cancelled playlist, as we've covered cancelled movie content all sorts over the years. Once again, thank you for making it halfway through this video, and let's get back to that one secret emotion hidden behind the cancelled cutting room floor of Inside Out 2. However, I can see why they considered it. Shame is definitely rife in teenagers, and if you're doing a superstore sweep of emotions, that would 100% be on there. Right alongside horniness, but we're skipping it. However, it does definitely put a darker cloud over the storytelling. With a lot of adolescents, particularly with the more timid Riley character that has been established, a lot of the shame they experience comes from self-perception and insecurity, as a lot of us can probably speak to. Whether how we look or just generally how we feel we come across, unfortunately, shame attaches itself to these things at our age. Not telling parents about getting bullied out of shame, not asking your crush out over shame of what you look like, and that's just the most palatable options. In approaching shame in young people, there is such a rabbit hole of darker mental health issues, as well as the shame that is associated with trauma, also something that many people go through. To say the least, shame is particularly complicated. You don't want to oversimplify an emotion that brings so much baggage. This is not to say that Inside Out 2 needed to tackle any of these issues, rather, I can see why such a loaded story point may have taken them too far from the story they wanted to tell. In this regard, embarrassment seems to be the decent compromise that kind of dances around the tip of the same iceberg. It's an emotion that persistently affects teenagers, which you could also get a lot of comedy out of. Shame isn't funny, it's just kind of sad, you know? Maybe embarrassment and sad hook up at some point. Who knows? Actually, we do know there's a certain Vertical ad that references a connection between the two, so look forward to shame in your future, Riley. My concerns with shame also line up with what Mann himself had to say on it. Talking to Screen Rant, he discussed how shame was not fun to watch, and they ultimately decided they would be too heavy for the movie. He goes on to say how he wants the movie to have the same rewatchability as the original. Inside Out deals with sadness, Riley shutting down after moving home, to the extent she tries to run away, and yeah, Bing Bong dies. These moments are raw and not fluffed up at all for the audience, yet still sit well with the more humorous moments in the movie. Like the emotion itself, I can see how shame could have really sucked the life out of the entire movie. In other words, I'm glad they didn't run with this. After all, there's a lot of people out there who are sometimes critical of Pixar's more emotionally loaded fare. Wherever you fall on that argument, I think it's fair to say that Shame the movie probably would have pushed that principle over the line. Anyway, we have alas ended with the emotions they've since confirmed. However, do you think there's a secret emotion in the movie they are yet to reveal? There'd definitely be an interesting twist, and honestly, I could see it being very likely, or at least someone will pop up in another post-credit scene. By expanding the cast like this, with the idea that concepts can also just appear out of thin air at any time, they've opened the Pandora's box of emotions, and I can see a surprise or two turning up in the movie. Let's just hope that these new additions don't result in overcrowding, because that can certainly be a stuffed head after a while. After losing a bunch of the original cast over pay disputes, I am wondering whether their characters' roles in the movie will be reduced. Well, we'll see, I guess. If there is a surprise emotion in the latter part of the movie, it certainly won't be shame. But there you are, that is the cancelled Inside Out 2 emotion you might have not known about. My name's been Daz. Thank you for reaching the very end of this video. If you were to add one extra emotion to the sequel movie, what would you pick and why? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the YouTube comments or on our Discord server. And for now, I shall see you in a little bit.